Wait. Before you dismiss this video for being a really narcissistic type of content, let me just assure you that I am not making this episode to tell you, oh, please have sympathy on me. I have worked and toiled so hard for the past 6 months to have some kind of presence on YouTube or for my podcast. It's not about that. I am making this episode to give you an exact glimpse of what the first 6 months look like when you start off in any kind of creative field. The competition is fierce and all of these fields are pretty saturated. Also, we are pretty clueless in the first 6 months. So I am making this episode for all the beginners and starters to have a look, and also for myself. If I ever excel in this field, I need to look back and see what my first 6 months were actually like. So it's just for going down the memory lanes purpose. So I'm very glad that this podcast has actually finished 6 months, and let's just have a look at what these 6 months were actually like. Hi you guys, how are you all? Welcome to yet another episode of Chatty Sundays. I do have my chai with me. I'm not going to disappoint you guys. I do have that with me. It's a very surreal feeling to even be here, like the podcast Upfront and personal. It completed 6 months, guys. It completed 6 months. When I was sitting on my terrace on December 31st, 2020, last day of the craziest year that we have ever had. And I had been thinking about having a podcast for a really long time. And I was just like, listen, I'm going to plan about it and I'm going to postpone it and I'm going to wait for the perfect day to come, and then this search will never end. So I might as well start and post. I took the phone out of my pocket and I recorded the first ever episode of this podcast. You know, I feel like in our life we get these handful of moments which are very special to us, that literally potentially change our lives. And I think that was one of those moments. I cannot even fathom that I have done this for 6 months. If you're new here and you don't know what the hell I'm rambling about, then let me just give you an overview. I'm Ananya, I am a lawyer, and I started a podcast very recently, like 6 months back. And when I started it as maybe as a hobby. Maybe I thought I'll release one episode, a standalone episode. But then I got so much into it that 6 months, 150 subscribers on YouTube, which is obviously a minuscule number, but whatever, and 75 episodes of the podcast, and I think 20 episodes here on YouTube. 6 months later, that's my progress, that's my journey, and I'm very excited to share each and every small detail about that journey with all of you guys. Guys, exactly 6 months back, I remember I was toiling with this idea of having a podcast. Why I wanted to have it, I don't clearly remember now, but so I had just finished about a year and a half of being a lawyer, and I thought that yes, being a lawyer is great. You know, when you are in law school, you don't really understand what being a real lawyer would actually mean and stand for. I enjoyed being the part of, being a lawyer and everything, and just being a professional, being an earning member of the society. All of that I really enjoyed, but I always thought that, the academic in me is getting satisfied, maybe the academic and the professional side of me, but not the creative side of my mind, of my heart. I am not creating anything, and the scope of creativity is very little in law anyways. And I thought, yeah, maybe I can start some few projects. I can maybe paint on my spare time. I can read, I can write, I can sing, those little hobbies we all have. But I'm like, that is not enough. I need a project, I need a commitment, and hence I started this podcast. I remember I released my trailer in October 2020. It was just after a really exhausting day. Like, it was a very busy day, and I was sitting with my laptop at 12 o'clock on a Saturday or something, and I just recorded my trailer on my laptop just like that, and it was really horrible, like the sound quality and everything. I didn't know what I was talking about. It was all over the place. And yes, I have reshot the trailer, so when you go back and listen to my podcast trailer, it's not the same. But yeah, since then I made my account on Anchor and I started. And then it took me about 3 months to put up my first episode. But once I put up my first episode, I knew that I couldn't stop. And I remember just thinking about, listen, I have to release very few episodes so that I can keep up with quality. So I was divided on this, whether I release like few episodes, like one episode per week, so that the quality is really nice, or I release as many bad episodes as I can in succession, just to get into the groove. And there is this YouTuber, Ali Abdal, and I follow him religiously on YouTube. He said that you have to make your first 50 or first 100 videos. They're going to be really bad. They're going to be really awful and substandard. But you have to get it out of your system so that you get to the stage of past 50 videos, like the person who has done 50 videos very, very soon. And hence I started releasing 3 to 4 episodes per week. Now, taking that decision was extremely tough because I also have a job, and for podcast and everything, I am the boss, right? So I can decide whatever hours I want to invest in it, and I don't want to invest in it. But when you're working for somebody else, yeah, you don't decide your own hours. So what if I work really very hard and I'm about to release an episode, and then a meeting or a call gets scheduled? So that is always something that deterred me. But I'm like, whatever, we will manage and we will see how as we go along. And it was really nice, actually. I think nobody knew in my workforce or my team that I was doing this, but somehow I got the time to do this. In the evenings, I remember at first I would go to the terrace and I would record it, but on the terrace, as a fool, I didn't realize that there was just a lot of traffic. So that traffic used to get recorded in the first 2 episodes. And then I'm like, I have to sit somewhere quiet, but then I have to tell my family members that I'm doing this. So I told my mother that, listen, I am doing this, and she didn't really quite understand what a podcast is. She didn't know that, but she's like, okay, it's an audio recording. She understood this much, that for audio recording you would need a little bit of time. So she gave me that time, and I told her that, listen, I'm going to record, so she would not disturb me for then half an hour or an hour. Then to figure out how to even start, what do I speak about? What is this podcast about? Yes, I want to have a podcast, but what is the theme? I heard somewhere that if you have to start a podcast, you should be able to explain the theme in one sentence or less. Otherwise, it's too broad and it's too not specific. And my podcast is very broad, so I understand that. I wanted to talk about a lot of topics. And then I'm like, listen, this podcast is going to be about being filterless. This podcast is going to be about just being brave about your journey on many things. Yes, there are a lot of episodes that I've made that are on tips, right? Where I come here and give you tips on productivity, finance, skincare. But whatever tips I've ever given, all those episodes are also based on personal anecdotes. I have always told you guys some stories that I have learned a lot from, and then hence, I build up that episode. So that's why the name Upfront and Personal really stuck with me. How I came up with the name, I just don't know. I just always knew that it was going to have like some kind of personal element. I wanted to start a podcast. Literally, I wanted to start a podcast where if people listen to it, they feel like somebody's talking to them in their ears. Yes, even if it gets academic, even if it gets like structured, point number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as we lawyers are very habitual of, or writing like this, speaking like this. I really wanted to have a friendly tone. I have been alone for quite some time in my own life. I grew up as a single child and I don't mingle a lot. I'm a little bit antisocial and really reserved person. So I wanted to just be a voice in somebody's ear, which is like a friend, which is friendly, in that they feel like somebody's talking to them, but they don't have any obligation to reply back to me because I'm just a voice. So it's a very chill relationship. I'm not expecting anything from you except that you listen to my episodes, and my episodes can be helpful. So the personal part of the name came from that kind of thought process. And then upfront and personal is a quite famous phrase. So that's how I made the phrase and I named the podcast. So the podcast started and I started talking about different things in the first like about 3 to 4 times a week. But then I realized that I am taking really huge gaps. Like I'm talking not as if, like even here, if I talk really slow and I take a lot of gaps, at least you have something to concentrate on. Maybe you will concentrate on my face. Maybe you'll comment on how horrible the lighting is. Whatever. Maybe you like this plant, which is fake, by the way. In video you have options, but in audio you have got nothing else than my voice, right? So if I talk like this, so I went to the market and it was good, and I saw my friend, she was wearing this very funny hat, and she is the best friend that I have got in this entire wide world. Please, like if this is just an audio, it's extremely boring. You know, there's an app, I've forgotten the name, but I remember somebody mentioning it in some podcast only, that there's an app where which basically puts people into sleep. There's a guy who derails a lot and does a lot of ms and ohs and stuff like that, and people listen to that audio to go to sleep. And I felt like I was working for that app because of the way I was speaking, literally. I was like, what is that? I would not like to listen to these episodes. So then I understood that, you know, my voice is the only thing that's binding me and the listeners. So I gotta be more proactive in it. So I started laughing on the podcast. I started, making sure that it's more prompt, it's more like the pauses are cut, it's more cinched in. Now, of course, there is a huge part of all of this is to figure out the technology that you're working with, right? I did it on Anchor because I figured out from some YouTube video that Anchor is free and Anchor would distribute it on Spotify and everything. So I was like, fine, let's just do this. But then I didn't know how to edit this. I'm completely clueless. And whenever I'd have interviews with people, I started having interviews after 2-3 months of starting the podcast. There would always be some kind of network issue, and those things needed to be cut out. So I just didn't know how to do that. And slowly, you know, through YouTube tutorials and this and that, I started gaining some knowledge about how to cut these audios and how to, put them in a way that makes sense. I think my biggest win was, there was this one time I interviewed one of my friends for an episode. And I edited it and I was listening to it when it went on Spotify. And there were not many edits, so I knew that, it's time to edit, has time. I literally could count those edits on my fingers. But that point passed, and a person who has edited that, I could also not tell that there's a cut in between. It was so well edited. And I just patted myself on the back. A person who didn't even know what Anchor was. 3 months down the lane, I'm doing such an editing. So I don't really credit myself enough for anything, but that was a very special moment for me. So yeah, so after now you'll be like, okay, fine, you did audio. When did you come to YouTube? Okay, so after 4.5 months of doing this podcast, I wasn't getting many listeners. I announced my podcast in March, right? Nobody knew that I had a podcast except very close friends and family. And when I announced it, a lot of people started listening to it, and of course my listenership increased. But it was still not great, right? Like even today on YouTube, even getting 100 views on a video is a huge deal for me. And at that time it was even lesser than that, because just understand, most of my audience is Indian, and in India, podcast is not a very popular form of entertainment. There are not very many podcasts from Indian people that people listen to. And even if they have Spotify, not many people know about Spotify also across generations. It's a very popular app, don't get me wrong. But nothing compared to like the reach that YouTube has, which is like intergeneration. Now, I'm not comparing companies or platforms or anything, just a general statement, what I noticed in my journey. Even if you have Spotify, you use that for music and not that much for podcasts. So podcast as a form of entertainment is anyways not famous. Even getting 10 listens on a random episode would mean a lot to me. So I knew that to increase this reach, I would have to come on YouTube. There is no other way. But I was too camera conscious to put out anything, right? So what I did in the, I think in the end of May 2021, like last to last month, I made my YouTube account and I started putting out videos, which would basically be like a graphic and just my audio with it. Like graphic would be the logo of my podcast. And people were tuning in maybe a little bit more than what, you know, Spotify had, the kind of reach that Spotify and other podcast based forms have, but it still was so less. Like you come to YouTube and you expect a video, which I was not giving to the viewers. So I was like, this plan is also tanking. So then I started putting out these videos, and it has definitely, you know, increased the traction. Yes, I understand I don't have the perfect lighting or perfect equipment or perfect anything, and I'm very like, no, I'm literally novice in this. But I am ready to do whatever that increases the reach of what I have to say and of this podcast. Now, people always say that this podcast has increased your work. Anyways, lawyers have so much workload. Like, don't you get tired of this? Don't you get overwhelmed of this? And I do at some points, a lot of points. But I think this podcast has really helped me to be sane. Literally, we have had such tough times. Literally, for all the people who are in their mid-20s, 30s, we all have put our lives on hold. I'm staying in my parents' house and I don't feel like an adult at all. It has been like a therapy for me. Honestly, it has taught me how to manage my time. You know, when I was just doing my job, I didn't have time for anything. But now, because I have this project and I have a commitment to release 2 videos every single week, I take out time somehow. I think everybody has got those 24 hours. It's on you how you want to utilize those 24 hours. And this podcast has given me a vigor, given me an energy. It has given me a purpose. In these 6 months have been very difficult, a lot of trial and error, but it taught me just so much, and it has extended my skill set to a million times. When you get a job and when you stop being a student, you feel like you'll stop growing. You'll just do your job and you'll come to your house, and whatever you learn on the job. But I think after starting the job, because I have this, I am continuously learning and I'm not stagnant. And that's a very big blessing, I would say. This podcast has really helped me just be a good and more creative person in general. I am super confident about speaking at places now. You know, at first as a lawyer, I have to speak to a lot of things, and you know, I have to deal with people, and I've never been extremely bad at this anyways. But now I'm like, please have a podcast, I'll handle this. So I have that confidence. Of course, speaking as a lawyer or speaking to clients or, you know, transactions is very different. But still, it has instilled a little bit of confidence in me. It has also, you know, literally taught me a lot about how much hard work content creators put in things. Oh my God, it's not easy to create a YouTube video. It's not easy to create a podcast. It's not easy to start a venture. And I'm so glad that I started this journey so that I am in the position to respect their work. Now, if I ever, you know, look at a YouTube video, I'm like, here is a cut, that's the editing. So I'm able to do that and decipher all of that, and I'm super glad to have that knowledge right now. And you know, there are so many people from my school, college, you know, people who I knew, they have reached out to me and they say so many nice things to me about what episode and what line really resonated with them, and it just is so refreshing. Everybody around us is so busy right now, but the fact that they take out a little bit time to listen to what I have to say and I can contribute to their daily lives in some form, shape or manner is just mind-boggling to me. Is mind-boggling a word? Please let me know. I'm not too sure. So yeah, these 6 months were not easy. These 6 months were not a smooth sail. I don't really get a lot of views on YouTube still. I'm trying to grow it as much as I can. But again, I have, you know, very little pockets of time here and there on which I can work on this. And I also have a very limited skill set. I'm trying to expand it. So yeah, but no matter what, just the process of doing this makes me so happy and makes me so contented and so fulfilled that I can't even put it into words. So you guys, I'm very, very thankful. If anybody has been there for past 6 months with me, all my friends, my parents who have been, you know, like a rock, even though they didn't quite understand what I was doing, They have been nothing shorter than angels to me. And all the people who found me through Instagram, through YouTube or anything, and they are, they have been following this podcast, thank you so much. I hope I am able to bring content to your plates which you can enjoy and cherish. So yeah, just thank you so much for being with me on this Chatty Sundays. I love talking to all of you. Hope you have a great weekend.